Job seekers always say to me, well, what if we ask those kind of questions back? Do it. I'm telling you to do it.
Now, before we dive in, just a quick reminder. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and should not be considered financial advice. Our full disclaimer is shown here and on our website. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of us reacting to finance TikToks. So today's episode is going to be centered around navigating your 20s. So your 20s are a very special time for everyone. Usually this is around the time when people are graduating college, they're starting maybe their first job, their first career. A lot of people out there are probably like, hey, how do I navigate this? How do I make a good first impression? What do I do once I actually start earning money? A lot of us during this time maybe just came out of college and are getting our first full-time job. So today's episode is going to be dedicated to help you understand how to navigate your 20s, how to avoid burnout, and also just overall navigating the interviewing process. So these are all going to be important tools you're going to need as you start navigating this transition from being someone who's mostly been in school to now joining the job market. So let's dive into some creative videos now and let's get your journey started right. So this first video is from a creator called New Money Nate, and he's actually going to talk to us about how to start to navigate your 20s.
Extremely difficult. They just are. Because for the first time in your entire life, you and your friends are not on the same timeline anymore. Up until now, everything has moved in sync. Same schools, same milestones, same pace. But then you hit your 20s and all hell breaks loose. One friend's climbing the ladder at some consulting firm and is making $200,000 a year. You got another friend that just started a D2C brand, just raised millions of dollars for this really successful startup. You got another friend that just got engaged, and you're sitting there thinking what the hell am I doing? It feels like a complete frenzy. People are moving in all these different directions. But here's the part that nobody tells you. You need to separate pace from direction. Just because someone is moving extremely fast in one direction does not mean that they're going to where you want to go. You need to take your time to find direction. Take the time to learn skills that will eventually print you money, okay? Quit very quickly if you're not learning, earning, or growing somewhere. Fail miserably, shake it off, and try something else. Every failure is for better clarity, not for speed. Speed is just chaos if you don't have direction. But once you find the career path that you're crazy about, or at least will help you build the life you want to live, then you apply pressure, then you build like hell. Because when you can honestly say, I like the direction, let's keep at it, you will find your pace and your speed naturally becomes really, really fast.
So yes, I want to talk about this. So when I was in my 20s, I myself didn't really know what I wanted to be. I was kind of chasing people and saying hey, do I want to be a public... At the time, of course, I was studying accounting. I was like, hey, do I want to be an auditor? Do I want to be a consultant? Do I just want to go into the corporate accounting world? I really didn't know what I wanted. And I was getting so many different, advice from either my career advisors, from my friends. I even had people who were my mentors who were alumni from my old school who were telling me man, I'm making 150 to 200,000 as a consultant. You should definitely come on as a consultant. And it was definitely a tricky journey overall, but what I ended up doing was, hey, I know, for example, having, let's say, the Big Four experience was important from what I've heard from many of my peers. So that was exactly what I did. I chose the path in my life that, one, allowed me to have kind of a taste of everything. I think in your 20s is kind of like your experimental phase where you're trying to really understand what is it that you want to do in life. Once you actually understand what you want to do in life, that's when you can start building upon it. If you try to, for example, go after, let's say, being a consultant, and then you invest so much time into it, you make a lot of money, you make the best of it, but at the same time you're miserable. You may not have time to maybe go out with friends and family. At one point, you might get pigeonholed into being a consultant and might not be able to pivot into other things. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I'm just saying that once you've, cemented something and gone so deep into the deep end of things, like at the pool or something, it's hard to navigate back sometimes. So really understanding where you want to go is the first aspect of everything, and then building up from there. That is very critical. Once you start building up from there, that's when you're going to get the higher titles, going to get the bigger pay. You're going to genuinely enjoy what you're doing because you know what you're doing. I think this is very important in your 20s. So comparing yourself to others is never going to be the best course of action. What the best thing for yourself will be is to really understand yourself and what you want to do. What is your destiny? That's going to be the most key and pivotal item that you need to think about. So let's move on to the next creator. So this next creator is called Realistic Recruiting. And he's actually going to talk to us about something that I even myself never thought about, asking behavioral questions during the interview process.
The people doing your job interview behavioral-based questions. Job seekers always say to me, well, what if we ask those kind of questions back? Do it. I'm telling you to do it. One of the worst things a job seeker can do on an interview is interview like they're scared to lose the job instead of like they're trying to get the job. So instead of some boring question you don't care about the answer to, like what skills are needed for this job, ask your future manager something like, can you tell me about the last person on your team you promoted? Can you tell me about the last time you got feedback from somebody on your team and implemented changes based on that feedback? What kind of things have you done to encourage your team to use their time off? How comfortable is your team not getting back to you overnight or over the weekend if you send them an email? These are the kind of questions that tell you what a culture is actually like. Your manager wants to know how you behave in certain situations, and you should want to know how they do too. There's nothing wrong with interviewing for a job like you're the kind of candidate they should want to hire. So instead of interviewing like you're lucky just to be there, interview like you're trying to find a place that you actually want to work.
So I'm going to be transparent here in this aspect. When I was interviewing for many of the roles that I've gotten, most of the questions that I would ask is, hey, so what drew you to this company? That's usually one of my favorite questions to ask, just to really gauge like, the mentality of why someone would want to work at that company. Another question that I usually would ask is, what are the skills needed for the potential candidate that you're looking for? What is like the ideal quality of skills that you want from this candidate? And then finally, my last one would be usually, in the first 30, 60, 90 days of me obtaining this position, what would be some key projects that you would want me to work on? So these are usually the 3 kinds of questions that I ask, during the interview process. But it never occurred to me that a lot of times when I would get a new employer, I wouldn't really understand how the inner workings of the environment or the culture was, because I wouldn't really ask, the hiring manager in the first place. Now, think about this. The worst thing you can do is have the great skill set to actually work at a company. Maybe make the money that you're looking for. Maybe even have the learning opportunities. But then you're engaged in a toxic work culture. And when I say toxic, I mean really toxic. Like, they're going to make you work crazy hours. The bosses are going to be constantly bothering you while you're on vacation. You're constantly, demoralized. You're treated like your work doesn't matter. All these aspects are very keen examples of a toxic work environment. And the worst thing you can do is chase the money, chase the title, but never truly understand how chasing these 2 items could lead to you being miserable, burning out your mental health, and overall just making you not want to wake up and go to work. The most key aspect of any work environment, besides the money and being able to learn and grow in your career, is the ability to actually like where you work. And to do that, you need to understand from, the current employee's perspective, hey, like, how do you react in X situation when something happens? Because that's really going to tell you what kind of manager they're going to be. And trust me, if you hate your manager, you're going to hate working there. So make sure you ask keen questions like this, which I'm going to even start doing if I were to start interviewing myself once more. Just really asking, how is your environment, people? Because that's very key nowadays. You don't want to work for a toxic company. So let's move on to the next creator now. Hello everyone, my name is Anthony and I'm the host of the Log Sanctuary. I hope you've been enjoying our content so far, and if you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, we have our website up here, and we also have some socials down here. And as always, leave your comments down below. So this next creator is attorney Ryan. So he's actually going to talk to us about, hey, God forbid, you're on the job, something happens, what can you do about it?
Says you won't get any workers' comp money because you were at fault for the accident, they are absolutely lying to you, and it's going to cost you a fortune. A workers' compensation claim, it's not the same as a lawsuit. Even if you are at fault for the injury, so long as you were working within the scope and course of your employment, that money is yours. But there's a little warning you need to pay attention to. If you are outside the scope and course of your employment, like drinking on the job or taking some special gummies, you might not get any money. But the general rule is, even if it is your fault, as long as it's a workplace injury, you can still get paid.
So let's actually talk about this. What is he talking about? So basically, you guys are probably thinking, oh, maybe the person's working in construction. Maybe the person's working as a delivery driver. Actually, workers' compensation can apply to any situation. You could even be in an office job, and God forbid something happens during the course of you going to get your coffee, God forbid, you will be entitled to workers' compensation. Now, you're probably asking, hey, Anthony, when does this not apply? In most cases, this will probably not apply if you're a contractor. So, what is a contractor? So a contractor is someone who is not really an employee of the company, but someone who's like a consultant or someone who's working on a special project for the company, but they're not really an employee. So the employer might ask them to do a special project for them. Maybe they're working on some analysis work, some reporting. These are contractors of the company, and in most cases, these kinds of people try to fall outside the realm of workers' comp because they're not really an employee. So you're kind of telling them, hey, this is the inputs, and they're going to produce the outputs for you. But you're not really directing them, directly. You're just telling them, hey, this is what I want, and that's it. Now, why is this distinction very clear? If you yourself ever find yourself working as a contractor or an employee of a company, just make sure you understand your rights in terms of if something happens. The worst thing you can do is get hurt on the job while you're doing, your duties. And then bam, you don't have any workers' comp to compensate you while you're out of work for a period of time. So this is going to be very key for you to understand as you develop these kinds of relationships at work. And yeah, let's move on to the next video now. So this next video is from Lillian Zhang, and she's actually going to talk to us about working hard during your 20s.
I don't think work-life balance really exists in your 20s if you're building your dream life. I work around 70 hours between my corporate job and my content media business. When I'm not at my day job, I'm pouring time into building something that's mine. And before anyone comes at me, I still take vacations and treat my loved ones because of this mindset and not in spite of it. My biggest fear is looking back at my 20s and regretting that I didn't go all in on my potential. I am not glorifying hustle culture, but if you see the big vision for yourself, the foundation you build in your 20s will shape the rest of your life. If you put in ordinary effort, you'll get ordinary results. Extraordinary effort creates extraordinary outcomes. So ask yourself, what's stopping you from reaching your full potential?
So let's actually talk about this. Your 20s are a very special time. And you can choose to do it, to use your 20s any way you deem fit. A lot of people may use their 20s, for example, to, start traveling. Maybe they use their 20s to kind of find themselves, or they use their 20s to be more social and go out and do things. Now, the worst thing you can do, I feel, is to really underestimate the power of your 20s. Your 20s are a time when you actually have some of the most energy, I feel. Once you hit like your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your energy levels do tend to drop. And this is just the natural course of how your body works. It's just the way it is. Now, your 20s, you can either choose to use your limitless potential of your 20s to either, go out and enjoy your life, or you can use it to build something that will stay with you for the rest of your life. I myself, chose to sacrifice my 20s and not go out as much, not do as much traveling, not do a lot of the fun things that a lot of my peers were doing. And I chose to actually go ham and work. So I didn't do any content creation in my 20s, of course, because at the time, I didn't really feel like I had, sadly, enough knowledge to actually share with everyone here. But my 20s, I did use it to actually, for example, work crazy hours. So in most of the jobs that I worked in during my 20s, if I worked less than 12 hours, it was something. It was a good day. In most cases, when I worked like in public accounting, I was working sometimes 14 to 16 hours a day, sometimes close to 80 to 100 hours a week. When I was working as a consultant, I was working like sometimes 14-hour days, 7 days a week for 3 to 5 months straight. But why was I doing this? So when I was in public accounting, that's actually the norm. You know, you have to work these crazy hours just to meet the deadlines that you have on a lot of your engagements. The reason I was working a lot of crazy hours as a consultant, though, was because I was actually paid hourly. So I was entitled to overtime pay, sometimes 2x pay, depending on the days I worked. So overall, I felt myself needing to work because as I saw my, as I saw my results coming in, my higher pay was coming in, more money was coming in, and I did feel fulfilled, doing all my projects for my clients. And overall, it was a great feeling. I felt that I was, maximizing my potential in the sense of, hey, the big checks are coming in. I was using that effectively to then put down payments on houses, to, continue to increase my portfolio. All of these aspects, now that I'm in my 30s, feel like, thank God I did it in my 20s. Because there's just no way I personally can do that now in my 30s. Like, I sometimes work maybe 12, 13-hour days now in my 30s, but I could barely do it for 2 days straight. So definitely your 20s is a time for you to capitalize on the youthful energy you have to then build your future now that when you're in your 30s or 40s. And trust me, your future self will thank you. I thank my 20-year-old self all the time. Like, thank God you did the hard work for me. So that while now in my 30s, not that I don't have to work as hard, but I'm not as afraid of, God forbid, like if I lose my job or anything like that, because I've started to build things that are kind of like my parachute. If God forbid something happens, I lose my job, anything of that nature, that's not something you wanted to deal with in your 30s or your 40s. So definitely use your 20s to capitalize, build yourself, build what you want to be in life. And then you can hopefully realize who you want to be. So let's move on to the next video now. So this next video is from a creator called FM Smith 319. And he's actually going to talk to us about burnout, which is very common nowadays and something we really need to pay attention to.
Is being expended all day long on a whole lot that you can't even control. We have to be extraordinarily mindful of where energy is going at work if we want any outside of work. And the good news is here, a lot of people are expending energy on things that are not useful. We cannot change their emotions, their opinions, their feelings, only our reactions to them. Meaning, we can react for hours or minutes. The testament to growth, the testament to energy management isn't never being triggered. We're human, we're gonna get triggered. It's shortening that trigger period. It's pivoting more quickly. It's adapting to the pressures, not running from them, building our capacity so that when we are faced with these things, we go energy management. Where can I put my energy right now towards places that are useful so that I have the energy to be engaged with my husband at dinner tonight, so that I can take my wife to date night on Friday. So that instead of her asking me for the 75th time, hey, did you hear what I said? And I'm like, no, I was zoned out on work. I'm actually there with her. Your energy is being expended all.
So let's actually talk about this. She is completely right. I have times myself when, I've probably worked 50, 60-hour weeks, and I kind of just like checked out. I'm like, I don't want to deal with anyone right now. If anyone talks to me, I'm gonna be like a sour mood. And it's all about the amount of energy and focus I put on work. And it's not just about the work you're doing, but also about the office politics, or maybe your boss is being a drag. So all of these aspects that you need to think about when you're at work. How do you actually mentally, not check out while you're at work, but kind of like don't expend as much energy on one aspect of what happened to you, in that one piece of the day. What I mean by that is, let's say you had a meeting with your manager and he's like chewing you out and he's pretty pissed. Maybe you didn't meet your deadline, something of that nature. The worst thing you can do is to dwell on it for hours on it and be angry about like, hey, like he just chewed me out. Because that's going to do is you expending your energy, your mental focus. And your energy, as much as we want to say is limitless, it's not. There's going to be a point in time where you're just going to be feeling burnt out. You're going to feel like depressed. You're going to feel that the world is against you. All of these aspects will come to light the more you kind of hurl insults at yourself, for example, or even try to hurl insults mentally to your boss. Like these are the kinds of energy that instead of expending it there, uses it as an opportunity to just kind of like say, okay, the event A happened. Let me crumble it up, throw it away, only take the good points. So for example, if there were some good points from the meeting, take those. Everything else, throw it in the trash. All the abuse, all the verbiage, all the unnecessary banter that they give you, throw it in the trash. Only take the key points, with yourself, and that's it. That's the key to surviving in this world, the key to surviving in workplace, and leading a fulfilling life, not just at work, but outside of work. Without these key distinctions and separating yourself from all the negative energy, will you be able to succeed and be able to fulfill what you really want in life? So, with that, that's going to be episode 18 of us reacting to finance TikToks. I hope everyone out there has a blessed day, and adios, everyone. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm wishing everyone out there all the best. All right, until next time, adios.